Our Google Plus Hangout with 3 recently returned crew members from the International Space Station, which is orbiting 250 miles above the planet right now. We have with us veteran astronauts Kevin Ford, the commander of Expedition 34, Tom Marshburn, flight engineer from Expedition 34 and 35, and Chris Hadfield, the former commander of Expedition 35 of the Canadian Space Agency. The first 2 astronauts I mentioned were both NASA astronauts. We have a number of other participants on the Hangout today. We have representatives of the National Model UN. We have Christina Mader, as well as Louis Kim and Asar Rossman. We have Michael Eaton, as well as Mike Eng from the National Model UN. And we have a number of other participants, such as Sean Flynn from News 14 in North Carolina. And we have Carl Franson from The Verge. We want to welcome everybody to the Hangout. And I want to go first to the crew who are in the studio here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston for any opening comments you might want to make, guys.
Hey, well, this is Kevin. Can you hear me, Kelly?
I can hear you great, Kevin.
Fantastic. Well, welcome everybody who's participating today. It's great to have everybody aboard. And I want to say I haven't seen too much of these guys in the last 2 months. I left the space station about 2 months ago, and these guys have just been home for a little bit over a week. So they're really in the middle of reconditioning and everything. And we had a great time on board as a crew of Expedition 34, and then they stayed aboard and conducted Expedition 35, both of which we think were really successful and were really fun. So we're great friends now, and it's great to all be back together. And we're happy to be here and talk NASA with you, tell you about the space station, how outstanding it is up there, how great it is to work on it up there, and how great it is for the people who work on it down here and for the public in general. So thanks for having us, Kelly.
Well, great. Well, let's go ahead and get to your questions first. Why waste time? Let's start out. I want to give Carl Franson with The Verge the first question here.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you well.
Yeah. Sorry, I had my mic muted. Some technical troubles. You guys don't know anything about that, you know, up in the space station. I'm sure you don't run into any troubles up there. But thank you for making the time. We have a question from one of our readers here about how emotional your return to Earth has been. How emotional have you found it?
I'll take it. Go ahead. Yeah, I can answer, I think maybe for all of us, that the first emotion is that you're leaving behind your brothers, leaving behind a bit of your family there. So regardless of the anticipation of getting back to seeing your own family, getting back to the good things about Earth, it's tough to leave your crewmates after having such an incredible adventure together. Spectacular landing, and then that's a whole other story in itself. But once you get back, I certainly want to see our families. That's the most emotional event. But after that, everything else just builds day by day. All the pleasures of living on Earth, the wind, the grass, the trees, the food, it just comes day by day, and you enjoy it. But quite a bit we look back at our adventure in space, and I don't know, for me, I'd like to get back there someday. Maybe we all do.
All right. Hey, I've heard it said many times in many ways that the space station is its own little United Nations on board. You have folks from 15 different countries that are participating in the space station activity. Let's take a question from one of our UN participants. Maybe we can start off with Mike Eng and Michael Eaton with the National Model UN.
Yeah, sure. One of our questions that we got from some of our students that participate in our program, this is for Kevin specifically, but maybe for all of you. Kevin, I read in your bio that you have a degree, a master's degree in international relations, in addition to lots of other degrees related to aerospace, engineering, and other things. Can you talk about kind of what your interest was in international relations, why you got into it for a master's degree, and how it's kind of changed your perspective in, you know, as an astronaut in space, working with other astronauts?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, at the time I pursued that degree, I was a military officer stationed overseas in Germany, and I had just really started traveling the world. You know, I grew up in northeastern Indiana, and went, you know, just kind of lived in the same state for the first 22 years. And then I joined the Air Force, and I was starting to really get out in the world and see lots of places. And of course, since then, I've really seen a lot of the world. But I just found it really, really fascinating to get the perspectives of people in other countries. You know, they all have very different backgrounds, where they came from, what their histories are, really kind of dictate how they look at the world. But I just thought it was really fun to learn the cultures and learn some of the languages and everything. And you know, to get the payoff, the ultimate payoff from that, ultimately living on the International Space Station was incredible, where we could go to Russia and we could go to Europe and we could go to Japan all within a few minutes, sometimes within seconds when you're doing some kinds of drills, and working with those cultures in the training as well, and bringing really all these countries together. One of the things that just really warms my heart is what a great project the International Space Station is. It doesn't include every country of the world, but includes 15 of the most affluent, richest ones who have a little bit of spare capacity to do something for future generations. And that's what we're doing up there. This is a project, it's a peaceful project, so unique on this planet, that we've all come together to do some really cool stuff, you know, and having Chris on board with me from Canada, and Akio Side for the first half of my increment from Japan, and everything. We just all feel like one group of people, and that's really what we are on this planet, one group of people trying to do something for the future.
All right. Hey, I want to go to one of the Google Plus questions that we got and bring Chris Hadfield into the conversation. The question is that they'd love to know, what was that scrumptious first sandwich you had when you first got back on Earth?
You know, living on the space station, the food is really good, but there's no way to preserve the texture of the food. The food is good, but it's sort of like eating the world's best baby food, a lot of it. It's all in a pouch or a squeezable something, and the taste is good and the variety is good, and it keeps us really healthy. I've just found out this week that, in fact, I came back a little stronger for straight raw muscle power than I launched. So the food is doing its job. But it's nothing like a big, messy, crunchy sandwich, and then you bite into it, little bits fall down, and it's got, you know, some crunchy bits and some soft bits, and, you know, a dill pickle, and that big variety of sliced meat and cheese and vegetables and lettuce and everything. Even though the taste of the food on board is good, the texture and the aromas and the straight multi-sensorial pleasure of food is something that you don't get in orbit, and it's one of the real nice reasons to come home.
All right. Thanks a lot, Chris. I heard you were doing some experimenting with how you could mix different foods together.
Yeah, in fact, I worked with the guys from Mythbusters. They were looking at fun stuff that we could do on board together, and they said they talked to some professional chefs, because we have what looks like a pretty long pantry list of pantry items or menu items, and they said, given this raw material of food, how could you make something, you know, a mashup or something together that would be both practical for us to make and something a little different than just squeezing one tube of something and then another tube of something. And the fact that we have tortillas on board and little packets of hot sauce really helped. And then we just chose a couple ingredients and made a space burrito. And it actually worked out really well. Broke up some meat. It's not a very good place to mix foods, because as soon as you take something out of the package, it becomes just a flying object around the inside, and it's very hard to get all things together. But they did come up with a practical way of just squeezing and layering a few things into one burrito, and it was good enough that I talked Chris Cassidy, who's up there right now, into trying it after he got up there, and he made the same concoction, and he really liked it as well. So it was a good, practical, and tasty space recipe, a space burrito.
And I'm going to use moderator's privilege here to ask you one more question on that, because I saw one of the recipes involved asparagus, and I got to ask you, does that do the same thing to you on orbit that it does on the ground?
There's no way to tell. It's an extremely well-ventilated environment up there, so no way to tell. Asparagus actually, asparagus is not all I think you saw in the video. It's when you're eating asparagus, that's all you can do, because there's asparagus wants to launch in every direction. It doesn't have a thick sauce on it, and any small hard piece of food or anything just, of course, wants to come out of the package and fly away. So you really have to pay attention and capture the rogue asparagus each time when you're eating. So it's not a good food to mix with other ones. But then again, it's one of the few that freeze dries well, so that when you eat it, it still tastes almost like fresh vegetables. And we look forward, we actually kind of, hey, who gets the asparagus today? Because it's one of the high demand items.
All right. Hey, let's go to Sean Flynn with News 14 in North Carolina.
Hello, gentlemen. Commander Hadfield, I know everyone calls you pretty much the rock star after that small video you put out there, but here in Tar Heel country, Tom, you're the rock star here. Everyone's real excited about what you've been doing up there. We've all been following your Twitter, all the pictures that you send. Talk about some of the pictures that you did send, specifically of this side of the world, and any plans you might have to come on back here and share some of your information of what you've done up there in space with the folks back in home.
Well, it's very hard to take a bad picture of the Earth from space. The world, when you first get there, you're just astounded by what you can see, just seeing the continents, the oceans. Mostly when you look out the window, you see an ocean with the clouds and that beautiful thin blue rim of the atmosphere. The wonder and the beauty of being up there for 5 months is that you start to pick out your favorite places. A number of favorite places grows. You begin to see nuances that you'd never realized before when you're looking at continents and ridges, and you begin to wonder, how did that form? So I was just trying to look at the natural beauty of the Earth and both ask the question and for myself answer in a very small way, how did this happen? Why does Australia look the way it does? How could this area of the world get so desiccated and this other area be so lush? But all of it is just breathtaking. So you really fall in love with the Earth again. And so I was just trying to put that out and help other people fall in love with their planet. So certainly hope to gather all those pictures together, and we have plans for coming up to North Carolina. And boy, I could be going through my home movies, my slides of pictures from space for hours. So I'll go as long as people are willing to take it. So it's a really wonderful place to be, and it's great to fall in love with your planet again.
All right, great. Hey, I know we've got some additional students from the National Model UN. Christina, you and one of your colleagues like to throw in a question here?
Great, yeah. So I have a question. It's kind of related to Model UN. In my real life, I work for the NGO Working Group on Women, Peace, and Security, and I've also worked with the National Girls Collaborative Project. So my question is about women in space. The underrepresentation of women in science and engineering fields is a critical issue for the world as a whole, but the United States in particular. NASA has been advancing gender equality in its own work, both in fostering female astronauts, scientists, and engineers, for example. There have been upwards of 31 women on the International Space Station, 27 of which were brought by NASA. And NASA also does programs on advancing girls and women in careers, such as NASA Girls Program. So my question is, how has the International Space Station served as a platform for cooperating at the international level with other countries in promoting gender equality? And are there particular programs or efforts to advance gender equality and women's involvement in engineering and science in the context of the International Space Station?
Sure. Well, this Chris Hadfield, we'll probably just split the answer amongst us, but what we really respect on the space station is competence. That is the fundamental thing that is required. Competence is everything. The personality and the culture and the background are, of course, the richness that you bring, but at the core of it is competence. And NASA stresses that right across the board. And we really honor that. And we have, luckily enough, with so many people that are interested in coming to the program, we have great depths of confidence within the astronaut corps and right across to the Johnson Space Center where we are. And specifically, if you want to look at gender, of course, the commander of the International Space Station a couple times has been a woman, with Peggy Whitson first and Sunny Williams recently. The chief of all flight crew operations for NASA here at the Johnson Space Center is Janet Cavandi. So she is the person who's in charge. The astronaut office is just one of the things that she's in charge of. And so, I mean, that's a tremendous accomplishment for any human being, Janet Cavandi being a superbly qualified one. And even more so, the director of the Johnson Space Center, who runs this entire place, all of the responsibilities, is Ellen Ochoa, Dr. Ellen Ochoa. And she is an ex-astronaut, wonderfully competent, a warm and really caring person, and doing a magnificent job, in which, like always, it's difficult times. There's always trials in trying to maintain a cutting-edge capability and to take care of all these people and their families and their jobs. And so I think the best measure of equality is where it becomes transparent. And in a lot of places in the world, it is not by any means, whether you divvy up people through culture or language or race or skin color or gender or whatever. There's lots of places it is not. But I think one of the places that it really is, that you can really hold up as a shining example of where competence and ability are what reign supreme, is both here at the Johnson Space Center, where we live and work, and on board the space station. All we're really looking for are good, competent people, and we're lucky enough to work and fly with people, male, female, and from all around the world.
I might just throw in a short addition, if I could. As Expedition 33 flight engineer, my commander was Sunita Williams. And to get kind of a little bit more to maybe the heart of your question was, how do we share this with other countries? And of course, she was the commander of the Russian crew as well. And Yuri Malenchenko was asked this question in Star City before launch. They said, "Hey, Yuri, you're flying with a woman commander. What do you think?" This is a question that they might ask in Russia that you might not see in the U.S. And he said just what Chris said. He said, "It doesn't matter to me at all. All that matters to me is that it's a great person and a great commander, and I have absolute trust in them and respect for them." And so Sunny set a great example for them. And she set a great example, not just in Russia, but across all cultures. I think if you look at our flight control room sometime on NASA TV, you're going to see an awful lot of women in technical positions, including many of them in the flight director chair, which is the highest of all positions for the operation of the space station, well above even us. So we get our marching orders from them. And so you see this competence. And that way we set a good example. The other countries participating in the International Space Station are setting this great example as well. And that's the message we can take to the rest of the world, is look at what we're doing.
Okay, thank you guys. I want to remind everybody that we're taking questions live through various means, through Google+, through Twitter, through Facebook, and I've got one I want to go to here from Twitter. At Pablo NYC, Pablo Bueno asks, for people who question space-based research, can you pick an experiment you think will tangibly benefit life on Earth?
Sure.
Yeah, the hard part of answering that question is just picking one. And I'll pick one just because I'm a physician. We do ultrasound experiments on board. We look at our bodies and the changes of zero gravity on our bodies. Everybody's familiar with ultrasound and its capabilities on Earth. What's unique about spaceflight and ultrasound is that because we don't have MRIs, CAT scans on board the space station, we are forced to answer a very difficult question. How do you take care of astronauts and get diagnostic imaging in space when you don't have that capability? So you take a known capability, ultrasound, fly it up there, and expand the boundaries of what it can do. Find out there's so many things it can do that our ground-based medical world, there's no need for it. So to be in big cities at least, so no need to do it. So why even look into that? It has actually tangibly affected the way surgeons, for instance, are trained around the world, really, mostly in the U.S., in the first hour of trauma care. You can get an ultrasound machine, small machine, onto a patient and make life and death decisions, and it's being done right now, and residents are being trained that way. But that's just a very small thing. Everything we do, from the basic research, which is going to have impacts 10, 20 years, 30 years from now, to things that devices that are being tested out on the space station. There was a device that came from Canada that looks at, it's a very, very small machine that measures samples within the blood and constituents of the blood. If you can get it really small and effective and working really well, then you can put it out to underserved areas of the world and provide better medical care for underserved areas. And so again, we see this. We have the privilege of being up there and seeing this reenacted over and over again with everything we put our hands on when we do research. So I wish I could have the hours to tell you all about everything that I know, but that's even just a small part of it.
Tom, do any of your colleagues have anything to add in there?
Go ahead, Chris.
Sure. You know, right now on the space station, there are over 100 experiments running simultaneously. Everything from something as mundane to just trying to learn how to make a really good spaceship. You know, how do you design a pump or a fan or a toilet, or what material should the hull be made of, or how do you cool it? in order to be able to go further from Earth, we have to be able to figure that out while we're still safely close, just like sailing ships did for centuries within sight of land before they could safely leave the security of a home port. We're doing that on space station. Mounted on top of the space station, we are collecting dark matter and dark energy from the universe to try and understand what 3/4 of everything is made of. We're just starting to understand the universe around us, and the space station is a stable, powered platform that's allowing us to do that. And we have a huge suite of sensors facing the Earth itself, looking at the atmosphere, looking at pollution in the atmosphere, looking at climate change. We've been taking pictures of the world for a little over 50 years, and in that time we've seen significant change, even in the time that we've been flying in space, looking at changes in glacial flow down in Patagonia or in the Aral Sea. That the changes are so vivid. And so it gives us everything from how to measure blood samples remotely right through to understanding the health of our own planet and to trying to understand what the universe is made of. And that's going on 24/7 on the space station, in amongst everything else that the space station represents. So it's a fascinating laboratory to be both a lab rat and a laboratory technician in.
And if you're not tired of the question yet, Kelly, you want me to throw one in?
Keep going, Kevin.
Okay, all right. Well, I launched on a Soyuz with 2 Russian crewmates and 32 fish. And while we were up there, we kept these fish in an aquarium, and the whole point of them going up with us, they're called Medaka. It's a Japanese experiment. And the experiment is called Medaka osteoclast. And the whole point of it is to look at osteoporosis studies. And these particular fish are unique in that they have bones like mammals. And since we're mammals too, we're really interested in what happens to the way their bone is created and destroyed. And these fish are they're very transparent, and they just are really, really great subjects for learning about the study of osteoporosis. Scientists looking at these particular samples, believe that they have a really good shot at making a big dent in osteoporosis someday, if maybe not even eliminating it. Wouldn't it be nice if osteoporosis someday went the way of scurvy and some of the other things that we've stamped out? And that would make a difference to the billions of people on the planet. Just that experiment itself would make the space station worthwhile. But like these guys said, hundreds going on at a time and thousands going on over the course of the space station's history.
Well, of course, that's why the station's up there, right? Hey, I would like to get back to those billions on the planet Earth again and how they interact. Laura O'Connor, you're one of our Model UN participants, and you haven't had a chance to ask a question. Ask away.
Thank you. I have a question from one of our staffers. Would you like to see a change policy for the international cooperation between countries for the cooperative space exploration? And if so, what change would you like to see?
Well, I'll answer it, I guess, unless you guys got something right away. I think what we're doing in space, the cooperative nature of the agreement, is unprecedented. I've been an astronaut for 21 years. When I came into the program, there was no cooperation between NASA and Russia. At the time, in fact, it was still very much right in the tailing edge of the Cold War. And to think where we are now, that all of us helped fly a Russian spaceship, that it was our lifeboat while we were on board, that we were integrated with crews from Russia. And you don't have to go very far back in human history where we had recent enmities between nations that are now doing this thing together. And it's not easy to do it this way. It is hard to do the International Space Station the way we're doing it. But we are doing it. And everybody on Earth, no matter where you're watching your particular dawn or your sunset, you can watch the space station go over your head as a shining, tangible example of what people can do when they work together. And we're writing the book on a lot of it. The way that we build up intergovernmental agreements, research agreements, day-to-day practicalities, how it is when there's a problem in one sector, how we all work together with missions control all around the world and solve that. If you're looking both in Model United Nations and the real United Nations or in any international organization, there's some real lessons to be learned from how we've managed to solve those problems since we started taking the U.S. space shuttle to the Russian space station Mir, and how far we've come ever since. And we're not perfect. We don't claim to be, but we're a pretty good example of how other people might do it. And we're all really proud, I think, to have helped move that, both that internal process, but also that human capability further.
All right, thanks, Chris. Hey, I'm going to take another question from online. Remember, Ask Astro is the hashtag for that. But Natalia Baronova asks that a question about how long is the space station going to remain in orbit, and what are the plans for maintaining and expanding the station?
Well, as far as we know, the late 2020s is the current plan. From what we've seen, certainly I could attest to the fact that being up there on the space station, it still seems to be a pristine, beautiful instrument for human exploration and research. There are consumables, those are resupplied, and there are things that break. We've demonstrated ability to fix that, and actually on our flight to fix it really fast if we need to.
Don't be bashful.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago you were outside, right?
That's weird. 10 days ago I was outside doing a spacewalk after finding out only 48 hours before that there was even a problem that required a spacewalk. So I feel like the space station just keep going as long as we have the will to keep it up there. There's nothing preventing it. So as Chris mentioned, these are the technologies that certainly will need to be used when we keep going further and further away for longer periods of time. And the processes as well as the materials, all of that, I have a lot of hope that we're going to be able to do that and do it very, very well because of what we're doing on the space station.
Can I throw in as well that you know, when before I was assigned to my space station flight, I kind of wondered, you know, myself, what is it we do up there, you know, on a day-to-day basis? And I'd come from a shuttle world, and I was a shuttle pilot, and I wasn't that in tune with the science. And I got up there, and the science on board is absolutely fascinating. You train it on the ground, and it's all kind of make-believe when you're training it. We used plastic fish to simulate the real fish that we were going to have on board. And then you get up there, and you get to see everything happening in zero gravity. It's just absolutely fascinating to see how different things can be. A lot of the stuff goes on behind racks and stuff, and we can't really see it all, combustion and that sort of thing for our safety purposes. But you can see it online, and you can find videos of it, and the scientists and the investigators are watching it real time on the planet Earth, and they're very excited about it. And we're not going to run out of things to do. If we fly this thing to 2028 and people are paying attention, they are going to get so many good ideas from the things that are going on right now. And I just think that the amount of research on board can blossom if we do the promotion right and we enable it properly and get it up there. There's almost no limit right now in my mind to what we could do on board for everybody.
Hey, thanks, guys. Hey, here's another one from Twitter. This may be a little bit more for Tom as a doctor, but a guy by the name of Daniel Franco, wants to know how many liters of blood can you lose in 5 months, and do heart muscles lose their fit?
Well, hopefully there's not a lot of blood loss while you're up there. Now, we lose about 15% of our total body water. That's just the normal state. Your body has this incredible ability to adapt to space. So we get up there, the body says, hey, all the fluid goes to the top, to the upper part of your body towards your head. Your body says, hey, there's too much on board, so it gets rid of it in a natural way. So we adapt pretty quickly, about 15%. And so it's that's pretty much all that happens. And I'm sorry, the other question was about what was the other one?
Heart atrophy.
Oh, the heart atrophy. Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's one of the things that's fascinating about spaceflight. Both bone loss, heart atrophy, your vessels atrophying, blood vessels, either from zero G or from radiation. Essentially, on the human being, zero gravity is an accelerated aging process. And we were all guinea pigs in that long research project where you're able to, within a few missions, do the amount of research that would take decades to require or to do on the ground as people age and study both what happens and fixes to the problems. So yeah, the heart atrophies. There's changes in the way the heart moves. I was involved in a study where we're very intently using ultrasound, EKG, every device that I've ever heard of to look at how my heart worked. to see exactly how the heart works, both in a resting condition and while exercising. And those results would generally be used to help people that are in ICUs, that are at bed rest for a long period of time, and as people get older, to try to counteract the atrophy that occurs with that as well.
You know, I'd like to ask all three of you as a follow-up to that, since you all just came back from the space station on long-duration stays. When you first got back, what did it feel like to get back on Earth? Tom, I think you were trying really hard not to move your head as I saw you sitting on the couch in Kazakhstan. Could you guys each tell us a little story about something to do with what it's like to come back to Earth after being on the station for so long?
Want to start?
Yeah, well, certainly there's this gigantic magnet that's sucking you and every part of your body into the ground. And I happened to be on the downside of the Soyuz after we stopped, tipped over and rolled. And the grass was about that far from my face as I was looking through the window. So climbing out of that position was one of the biggest physical challenges I've ever had. And you're right, you don't want to move your head, because as soon as you move your head, the world tilts and spins all around you, because your inner ear just isn't used to interpreting that gravity vector very well. It takes a while. And that, for me, was connected to my stomach, so I just did not want to move my head. But it went away after a couple of days, or almost completely in a couple of days, but most of it went away even in just a few hours. But boy, the way the gravity sucks you into the ground is a very remarkable force. It's unbelievable.
It's amazing how adaptable the human body is, that after 40 or 50 years here of living in gravity, suddenly when we get to space, your body immediately starts to adapt to weightlessness. It starts turning you from an earthling into a spaceling. And in some ways, it's easier on your body. Your heart doesn't need to fight gravity. You don't even really need a balance system. You become totally visually based. You can fly everywhere that you go. And so it's almost, you know, I've said before, it's sort of like a superpower. You can fly and float and tumble, and you really get used to it. But then when you come home, gravity just feels so unfair. I mean, it's bizarre. And the first time I worked with my physical trainer right after I got back, the next day, I'm on the exercise mat, and just the weight of my own head, I swore someone had their foot on my neck and was scrunching my head down into the floor. Just you're so unused to the weight of your own body, and it manifests itself all different ways. You have the dizziness, you aren't regulating your own blood pressure, you can't balance properly, you feel nauseous. Even though your strength is okay, your cardiovascular system isn't putting the blood in the right places. It's kind of a brutal return home. It's worth thinking about for going to Mars, though. About 5 or 6 months is how long it'll take you to get to another planet, and so we're really trying to learn, what is the body going to be like when we get there? How many days grace will you need to give a crew when they first get to another planet before they're able to truly put on a spacesuit and go do something useful outside? Do we have to spin our whole spaceship to keep an artificial gravity like you see in some science fiction stories? Or will we learn enough on the space station about weightlessness to show maybe if you give a few days, the astronauts can reliably get outside and do a spacewalk? We're learning all that from station, and we're just the 6-foot-tall guinea pigs trying to figure out those answers. But the life of a guinea pig isn't always pleasant, and the readaptation is keeping us under its thumb right now.
And yeah, I'm not 6 foot tall, but I am a guinea pig. So maybe I'll just throw in a couple of the other things too. The sensory changes that you go through. Just a story from in space, and I think I might have told these guys about it while I was up there. But when I was up there alone one time, I was at the cupola window looking out, and I swore out of the corner of my eye I saw a bird fly over and land on the solar array of the Soyuz, and I thought, I wonder what kind of bird that is. Before I thought about it, I realized it's probably not a bird 250 miles high, doing 17,000 miles per hour, and indeed it was just a piece of debris going by and heading toward the glass. But it's funny how your Earth environment, you're used to soaking things in, and the way your eyes and mind interprets things, and you get used to the zero gravity up there, and you get used to 22 degrees Celsius, about 72 degrees Fahrenheit, for 5 straight months. You get used to about 35% humidity, and we have some ventilation, so a very light breeze. But then you come back to Earth, and all of a sudden, finally you get some wind in your face, and rain seems like a really beautiful thing. I remember being with some people, and they were a little little complaining about the rain. I was like, this is great, rain, water falling out of the sky. It's almost hard to imagine after all that time. And another thing from Kazakhstan was when I got to Kustanai after the helicopter ride, they immediately gave me some beautiful flowers, which when I saw them coming, I just like, wow, I haven't seen those kinds of colors. And I put them in my arms, and the aroma from them, though beautiful and great, was overwhelming. I just said, somebody hold these and I'll get back to them a little bit later, because you really do, you are in tune on the Earth with all these things that come and go and all the senses around you, and so we're a little deprived of those in space and have to get used to them again back on the planet.
All right, great. Well, hey, let's cycle through our folks that are hanging 10 with us here on the Hangout. Carl, how about you for another question?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to hear all your answers. Really quite a journey that you guys have all been on. I wanted to ask a little bit about the way you've been able to share that, particularly for Commander Hadfield. We've had some readers interested in, obviously, your numerous YouTube videos and your songs and just your use of Twitter itself to social media. You have a Tumblr, I believe. So your use of social media and I believe you all have, social media presences, but this one was from one of our readers for Commander Hadfield, and just curious as to, what's been your experience with that? What drew you to it, and what surprised you about that experience?
Well, I first flew in space almost 20 years ago. I helped build the Russian space station Mir. And at that time, their social media didn't really exist. The internet was really just getting going. Every picture we took on the way to Mir was on film. And so it was months before I could even show anybody what it looked like. And I've been trying for the last 20 years to tell people how incredibly overpoweringly beautiful our planet is everywhere you look, and how one little change of the sun angle will show you something on the planet that completely surprises you, the beauty of the ripples in the water, or the currents of the Gulf Stream, or how a river suddenly turns to silver. And I can say these things out loud, but with the technology that NASA has put on board right now, the ability to real time share the experience, I think has really helped show why we even do this. Why do we explore? It's not so that a few remote people can take some pictures and then come show it to you in your high school gymnasium 5 years from now. It's because it is real time, adding to the richness of the human experience. And we now have the technology on board to do that and show people within minutes of seeing something spectacular on board, with us sharing a joke or an idea. Or Kevin one night said, hey, let's float some water balls around in Node 1 and just reflect and play with 2 and put some different oils and things together and just see how things look. That night, we're sending pictures to the Earth of just how spectacular a ball of water is when you look at it in a whole new environment. And so I've been trying for 20 years to do my best to share the experience that we're trusted with of flying in space. Now with the technology, we're not just robots up there. This is not just simple robotic photography. This is an enrichment of the overall human experience, and we now have a way to do it real time, to make it interactive. And I'm just delighted that with the capability that's on board the space station now, everything from the science that we're doing right through to music that is so important to everybody around the world. Why not have that as part of this human experience in a new outpost as well? And it's been a lot of fun. I think it adds to our fun on board, and it definitely adds to the public awareness of what space station can bring to everybody.
Thank you. That's great.
Great. Hey, let's see, Sean Flynn, why don't you take another crack at it?
I did want to go back to Dr. Marshburn. Forgive me, I know you're a physician. I don't know if you have any surgical background, but the last 2 days you were up there, obviously you did that emergency spacewalk. Which do you think is harder, actually performing surgery with gravity or performing surgery on the space station without gravity?
That's a great question. You spend years and years getting ready to do surgery on a human being for good reason. I was an emergency room doctor, so only the most extreme surgery would I ever do in the ER. The difference, of course, in space is that we are trained for years and years to do a very limited set of tasks up there. But there are some similarities. No matter what happens on a spacewalk when you get to the site, and we were going out there to try to help diagnose whatever the problem was, what the leak is, an ammonia leak that was out there, see if we could find it. Same thing, when you open up a patient, you're not really sure what you're going to find in there, so you have to be willing to think and act based on whatever you find at the site there. So the other big thing that's very reassuring, the space station is huge. It is incredibly complex, and as spacewalkers, we know that we are just the on-site eyes and hands of an enormous amount of people who are looking through our cameras, who are feeding us information, who are giving us instruction. And so it's very clear through the voices you hear and just through your understanding of how a spacewalk has to work, that there's an army of people who are actually doing this work and making the diagnosis. And we just happen to be the hands and the gloves that are hands on the bolts there. It's incredible privilege to be a part of something like that. It's very humbling, actually. I wish everybody could see the same views we did, because we got to see the views when you had a second to break away and look around us. But that is certainly the biggest difference.
Hey, Tom, I don't know if you guys had heard, but they turned the 2B channel back on yesterday, and so we've got full power from that set of solar arrays again. We're still looking to watch the trends and see if we've completely stopped the leaks, but you got the power back on inside the space station from all 8 arrays.
That feels great, but I tell you, starting with the people who made the decision that yes, this could be done, and a spacewalk could be done in 2 days, we couldn't believe the audacity of the people to come up with that decision, but at no time did we feel rushed or unsafe, and we feel like NASA made exactly the right decision to put us out there. A very safe and logical one as well. So it's incredibly gratifying to know that that kind of decision through all levels can be made and have it all work out. It was wonderful.
I think that was an international effort from what I heard. One of the Russian crew members spotted the ammonia flakes first, and they reported it to a Canadian commander, and then you had 2 American spacewalkers that went out and fixed it, while the Canadian commander was the intervehicular officer. Let's go back to the whole international and Model UN aspect and talk to Christina and her folks and see what they've got to ask about that.
Hi, my name is Samir Kanal, and before I ask my question, I just want to say thank you so much, and also sorry for any background noise. There's a thunderstorm in New York City, and we're right outside the UN right now. So I wanted to ask, you already mentioned about peaceful cooperation and how unprecedented that is. One of the topics that we often discuss in Model UN is militarization and weaponization of space. And I wanted to ask you if you had any general thoughts on that, and if you thought that cooperation between these 15 countries on the International Space Station helped reduce the likelihood of conflict in general or the preparations for that in space.
Yeah, nations are motivated by a lot of things. Survival, by their own self-sufficiency, being self-sufficient. But the International Space Station is all about discovery and exploration, and a multinational effort where some of the richest nations in the world come together to explore. That is a very remarkable achievement. Militarization of space, I know that will go through many nations' minds, and there will be advances and reaching out in that area, but the International Space Station shows what can be done just for that very high level of human evolution to explore. So we represent human beings, not individuals from different countries, but the human race itself. And I think the International Space Station stands for that.
And we're we're at war with a common enemy, and that is complexity. And the great right on the edge of human capability to even do what we're doing on there. It's almost too much for any one nation to shoulder. Some countries can do it for a little while, but to make it through all of our economic cycles and our political cycles that every nation is faced with, it's very difficult to start to leave Earth now with the technology that we have and do it completely, any one nation or any one sub-organization on their own. And I think the beauty of it is the complexity and the risks of it become a common enemy that then unites people that might not otherwise be working together. And to be able to have Pavel Vinogradov float over to me and say, Chris, I see a little leak outside. And for me then to go with him to the window, and then the two of us talk with everybody on board, and then talk with Heather down in, who was the flight director at the time, and then Heather having her team look at the data, everybody from around the world, with Pavel and I suiting up Tom and Chris to go outside and fix this thing on behalf of an international nation. To me, it was just a lovely little microcosm of how we all can be when we decide, for whatever reasons, to work together in a common direction. And there's lots of reasons and lots of examples where we don't do things right. But there are some examples where we really do things right. And you need examples to inspire people. And we're just so happy. We've been working at it for a lot of years together, but we're really pleased that we're part of one of those examples. And we know it's not perfect, but it's a pretty good example. And the results hopefully speak for themselves.
I'll just throw out too, I don't think there's any turning back at this point in terms of the international cooperation. This is not only has it worked well, and it's a good example, but it seems to be pretty much the consensus that future major endeavors like this, whatever it might be, are going to be international efforts together. So that's a good feeling that the International Space Station kind of kicked us off in that direction. I don't think we're ever going back as a planet. So that'll be a good legacy for the space station.
All right, let's go back to Mike and Mike. Any questions from you?
Sure, and Samir, you took part one of mine. So I imagine after being in space, looking down at the Earth and seeing no political boundaries, that when you come back and turn on the news and some of the skirmishes that continue, you just want to strangle people and say, but we're all on one planet. How do you deal with those things, and what do you say to people to try and express that we're all in this together with the unique perspective that you have, having been in space?
Yeah. It's a great privilege for us to be up there, and everybody has their problems. Everybody has their challenges for their own survival. We can see rivers where the river has moved every year. You can see the tribes of people, or the small towns that have moved with that river. People just clustered around water. Just a lot of the world is just trying to survive. So we realized that we were in a privileged position to be able to look down on all that. But my feeling about it is that I felt like I had a more universal picture of where human beings are. You see the Milky Way, the vast Milky Way. You see the planet as more like a globe, so much more a part of the Milky Way. And you imagine the humans on this globe, they're a very tiny, very fragile part of it. So I almost felt like the human race we're in our teenage years, or maybe even younger, in our evolution. And it's actually gave me a great sense of hope for human beings as we continue to mature, maybe it's through space flight, but through all endeavors on the ground, that we are actually getting better and better as time goes on.
Yeah, I think there are always reasons to despair if you want. There are always going to be people, just like in any big family, there's always someone having a squabble. And if you really want to focus on it, there's always something horrible going on. But there are a lot more great things going on than there are horrible things. We tend to just point our cameras at the most newsworthy, unpleasant thing that's happening today, because it's maybe less shocking than the beauty and the wonder and the grace that is almost the rest of the human life. From orbit, you get to see the whole world in an hour and a half. You get to see where people are trying their best to live their lives. Most people don't maybe have the mobility to go somewhere else. They're living in this particular part of the world. One of the things I tried on orbit was to tell me where I should visit when I come back. I was shocked at the number of people, the vast majority of people that said, you need to come to my hometown. This is the most beautiful part of the world. This is where people are good to each other. And this is from everywhere on the planet. The languages, I can't even read the alphabet. People are telling me this is a wonderful place. We are good people here, and we are just trying to lead a life, a productive and life of grace for ourselves and our children. And yes, it's easy to focus on the headline of the day or some horribly behaving person who does something rude and obnoxious. But there's so much beauty and wonder in the world, and hopefully the perspective, of course, that affects us directly, but the ones that we try and share will influence as many people as possible to appreciate the big picture, appreciate the real wonder that's going on, and maybe shape their lives a little bit in that direction also.
Thanks, guys. Hey, as I mentioned, we're taking questions from all around the social media sphere. We have a special International Space Station Facebook page. We've got a question from Cindy Hantucci, who asked about her 9th grade class of science students, and they're studying right now future space missions, especially going to Mars. And she wanted to know if the space station missions are limited by radiation exposure, or if that problem's been solved.
Well, I guess I'll take a crack at it. It's my turn. Those were great answers, by the way, you guys just gave. The radiation problem is very serious. Fortunately, when we're in low Earth orbit, we have the Van Allen belts helping us out, protecting us a little bit. Nevertheless, we're learning a lot about the radiation environment there. With other kinds of vehicles, we're learning a lot about the radiation environment outside in deep space, and it's a very serious problem. There's a lot of dangerous radiation out there. So when we do start visiting other planets, it's not that far away. When we do start doing it, we need to solve that problem. So we're learning a lot from station and other vehicles too that are part of the exploration effort. And you're absolutely right. We have to crack that one and learn to live out in it and handle it before we move on out.
All right. Let's give Laura O'Connor another chance to ask a UN-related question.
Thank you. This is slightly different and not necessarily UN related, but when most of our volunteers at National Model UN found out about this call, we were all very excited, and many of us spoke about how we ourselves would like to go into space. So with that in mind, do you think spaceflight is something that will be accessible to the masses within our lifetime, or perhaps in the next generation?
I got to leave. You want me to talk?
Yeah.
The answer, of course, is absolutely yes. If you were doing a Model UN in 1908 or 1910, or League of Nations or whatever existed then, but you could have asked the same thing about airplane travel. Or if it had been 300 years previous, you could have asked the same about transoceanic travel in a boat. We always take the very limit of our technology and push it through large organizations and research groups and a few people that are willing to take the risk until we develop the technology that then drops the risk. And once you've got the risk down, then you can start dropping the cost and then raising the accessibility. And there's multiple repeated examples of that throughout human history. Right now, we are somewhere around, I don't know, 1912 in aviation, where yes, airplanes fly on a regular basis. They can fly across the English Channel, not quite across the Atlantic yet, but people regularly fly and don't die. But there's still a lot of risk involved, and you still don't really have room just for pure passengers. Even if right now, if you have the money to fly on the Soyuz, like a few wealthy people have, they still have to go and train. When you get on an airliner and the steward or stewardess at the front stands up and gives a 2-minute brief on the safety exits, that briefing takes about 9 months to fly on the Soyuz. You really have to train for quite a while just to go. And we're still at that fledgling stage. But there are companies right now working really hard to bring it to many more people, at least suborbital. And it's just the technology that limits it. We need to invent slightly better engines, just like they did 100 years ago with airplanes. We need to invent better protective vehicles and more automated systems so it doesn't require so much human interaction. But to think that space is some sacrosanct thing that we can't figure out the technology that will make it more accessible to people is just proven wrong by so many things that have happened in the past in history. Yes, we'll get there. Hopefully the work that we've contributed to this and that all of the governments that are currently working on will bring it into the popular realm, the common realm of safety and thus affordability. Exactly when, it's like trying to predict jet engines in 1915, but once you get through those technological hurdles, then it becomes part of the common human experience, and we can really then allow the beauty and the wonder of perspective that orbiting the world brings to so many more people, and that'll just enrich us all.
All right, I'll throw one more out from the internet from Jawad. and this is a little bit related to the recent Google Plus Hangout with the cast of the new Star Trek movie. It's did you see or encounter anything in space that might make you believe in the existence of intelligent life outside of our planet?
Just speaking for myself, the only thing I saw was just the number of stars. And that was buttressed with the knowledge that NASA has provided largely, that most of those stars probably are surrounded by planets. Every star we look at now has planets. They're not all Earth-like, but now we're discovering the hard-to-find, in other words, the Earth-like planets out there. So the night sky from the space station looks a lot like it does on Earth if you can find a field far away from any city lights. So you can have that experience as well. But if you let your eyes adjust, you can see that stars don't twinkle. You can see planets as little disks. So you feel like you are a part of that universe. So that is the only thing that made me think of life on other planets. I think it's almost a certainty. Of course, I don't know that. That's one of the reasons why we're doing the research. But otherwise, anything that was unexplained was just something that was unexplained, like little glittering pieces of things flying off of your space station, which turned out to be ammonia. There's usually a reason. Anything? Did you see anything?
I don't have anything else to add. I didn't see anything. You know, I had the same imagination, I think, that Tom had just out there. It is a small planet. Almost saw our Earth, our globe, as like a city, just with it's just a very small place in the universe. So we do feel the grandeur of it and the infinity of it all out there. So it's hard to imagine that there's not. But I didn't see anything that showed me that there were signs coming to visit us yet.
All right. Guys, I understand that Chris had to take off for some medical exams or something like that. Let's take one more question here before we wrap up, and I want to get to Christina. You've got one other person there who hasn't had a chance to ask a question. Let's get the last live person on the Hangout into the mix.
Hi, thanks so much. My name's Sasha Slayman. It's so nice to hear all of your responses and get to chat with you. It's not every day we get to talk to astronauts, so this has been really fantastic. So I guess one last thing we're interested in knowing about is how do you think we can build the capacity of other countries who aren't able to send astronauts to space or have space programs so that they can experience the space station in the way that you do? Is that possible, or how do you see the future of other countries participating?
Well, that's a great question. You know, not every country has the resources that the richest do. One of the United Kingdom, again, just joined human spaceflight and assigned Tim Peake to go fly in 2015, 2016, sometime around there. So countries are starting to come back into it. And we would like to see, you know, a cooperation really on a really large international scale. We do know, you know, that there are finances involved. This does cost something, and those countries that participate like to have the participation of their citizens. But you know, hopefully, like Chris Hadfield was saying earlier, you know, as we get more and more capacity and more space flights, and maybe even expand crews on the International Space Station to a larger complement. Currently, we usually have 6 there, sometimes down to 3. If we could have a bit bigger crew up there, then hopefully we can expand the number of countries that participate that and go out and share it with the rest of the world. But what we're doing is really for the entire planet. So I think that's a big plus. And hopefully 5 to 10 years and on down the line, we'll be able to get more countries involved.
And it's happening right now as well. Italy, for instance, does not have a launch pad, as far as I know, for sending people into space. It doesn't have a rocket that is developed. However, it builds beautiful spacecraft, and we are able to enjoy a lot of the modules that Italy has built. Several of them attached to the space station, and one of their astronauts, Luca Parmitano, is going to be launching here in just a few days to go up there. So there are many ways that countries can be involved, and that is part of the international effort. Not every country in the international effort has to have all the elements of a space program. That's how all of us together can be greater than as a whole can be greater than all of us individually, just added up. So we're looking forward to having Luca on board, certainly.
You know, I think that's a great way to wrap it up with that note of cooperation. I want to thank everybody on this Google Plus Hangout today, especially Kevin Ford, Tom Marshburn, and Chris Hadfield, all the Model UN participants, our media participants. It's been really great having everybody here and all the folks out on Facebook and Twitter and every other social media mechanism we have, Google Plus, of course. We look forward to seeing you guys all again. I'm Kelly Humphreys from the Johnson Spacer in Houston, Texas, and thanks everybody.